Hey, good morning. It's Monday after the Super Bowl. I am reading from here, and it is the first chapter, and it's called Taking Out the Trash. And I'm going to skip a lot because it's some other stuff and focus on the important part. This powerful conception of land use would play a key role in future categorizations of race and class on the experimental continent. Before they even established new and busy societies, colonizers denoted some people as entrepreneurial stewards of the exploitable land. They declared others, the vast majority, as mere occupiers, a people with no measurable investment in productivity or in commerce. Whether barren or empty, uncultivated or rank, the land acquired a quintessentially English meaning. The English were obsessed with waste, which is why America was first and foremost a wasteland in their eyes. Wasteland meant undeveloped land. Land that was outside of the circulation of commercial exchange and part of the understood rules of agricultural production. To lie in waste, in biblical language, meant to exist desolate and unattended. In agrarian terms, it was to be left fallow and unimproved. Wasteland was idle land. Arable tracts of desirable property could only be associated with furrowed fields, rows of crops and fruit trees, golden waves of grain, and pasture for cattle and sheep. John Smith embraced the same ideological premise with the precise, if crude, allusion. The Englishman's rights to the land were ensured by his commitment to carpeting the soil with manure. An English elixir of animal waste would magically transform the Virginia wilderness, making untilled wasteland into valuable English territory. Waste was there to be treated and then exploited. Waste was wealth as yet unrealized. In his discourse of Western planting, Hakluyt, that's Hakluyt, confidently described the entire continent as that waste firm of America, not terra firma, but waste firm. He saw natural resources as raw materials that could be converted into valuable commodities. Like other Englishmen of his day, he equated wasteland with commons, forests, and fens, those lands that 16th century agrarian improvers eyed for prospective profits. Wasteland served the interests of private owners in the commercial marketplace when the commons was enclosed and sheep and cattle grazed there. Forests could be cut down for timber and cleared for settlements. Fens or marshes could be drained and reconstituted as rich arable farmland. It's not just the land that could be waste. People could be waste too. And this brings us to our most important point of embarkation. Hakluyt's America required what he classified as waste people. The core of laborers needed to cut down the trees, beat the hemp for making rope, gather honey, salt and dry fish, dress raw animal hides, dig the earth for minerals, raise olives and silk, and sack and sort and pack bird feathers. He pictured paupers, vagabonds, convicts, debtors, and lusty young men without employment doing all such work. The fry, young children, of wandering beggars that grow up idly and hurtfully and burdenous to the realm might be unladen and better bred up. Merchants would be sent to trade with the Indians, selling trinkets, venting wet cloth goods, and gathering more information about the interior of the continent. Artisans were needed, millwrights to process the timber, carpenters, brickmakers, and plasterers to build the settlement, cooks, launderers, bakes, tailors, and cobblers to service the infant colony. Where would these workers come from? The artisans, he felt, could be spared without weakening the English economy, but the bulk of the labor force was to come from the swelling numbers of poor and homeless. They were, in Hakluyt's disturbing illusion, ready to eat up one another, already cannibalizing the British economy. Idle and unused, they were waiting to be transplanted to the American land to be better, albeit no more humanely put to use. This view of poverty was widely shared. One persistent project, first promoted in 1580 but never realized, involved raising a fleet of 100-ton fishing vessels comprising 10,000 men, half of whom were to be impoverished vagrants. The galley labor scheme was designed to beat the famously industrious Dutch at the fishing trade. Leading mathematician and geographer John Dee was another who imagined a maritime solution to poverty. In 1577, as the British Navy expanded, he proposed converting the poor into sailors. Others wished for the indigent to be swept from the streets one way or another, whether gathered up as forced labor building highways and fortifications, or herded into prisons and workhouses. London's Bridewell Prison was chartered in 1553, the first institution of its kind to propose reformation of vagrants. By the 1570s, more houses of corrections had opened their doors. Their founders offered to train the children of the poor to be brought up in labor and work, so they would not follow in the footsteps of their parents and become idle rogues. In this sense, the Hakluyt foresaw in a colonized America was one giant workhouse. This cannot be emphasized enough. As from the waste firm of America was settled, it would become a place where the surplus poor, the waste people of England, could be converted into economic assets. The land and the poor could be harvested together and add to, rather than continue to subtract from, the nation's wealth. Among the first waves of workers were the convicts, who were employed at heavy labor, felling trees and burning them for pitch, tar, and soap ash. Others would dig in the mines for gold, silver, ore, and copper. The convicts were not paid wages. As debt slaves, they were obliged to repay the English Commonwealth for their crimes by producing commodities for export. In return, they would be kept from a life of crime, avoiding, in Hakluyt's words, being miserably hanged or packed into prisons to pitifully pine away and die. As he saw it, the larger reward would be reaped in the next generation. By importing raw goods from the New World and exporting cloth and other commodities in return, the poor at home would find work, so not one poor creature would feel impelled to steal, to starve, and to beg as they do. They would prosper along with the growth of colonial trade. The children of wandering beggars have been kept from idleness and made by their own honest and easy labor, would grow up responsibly without surcharging others. Children who escape pauperism, no longer burdens on the state, might re-enter the workforce as honest laborers. The poor fries sent overseas would now be better bred up, making the lot of the English people better off, and the working poor more industrious. It all sounded perfectly logical and realizable. Seeing the indigent as wastrels, as dregs of society, was certainly nothing new. The English had waged a war against the poor, especially vagrants and vagabonds, for generations. A series of laws in the 14th century led to a concerted campaign to root out this wretched mother of all vice. By the 16th century, harsh laws and punishments were fixed in place. Public stocks were built in towns for runaway servants, along with whipping posts and cages variously placed around London. Hot branding irons and ear boring identified this underclass and set them apart as the criminal contingent. An act of 1547 allowed for vagrants to be branded with a V on their breasts and enslaved. While this unusual piece of legislation appears to never have been put into practice, it was nonetheless a natural outgrowth of the widespread vilification of the poor. The poor were human waste, refuse. The sturdy poor, those without physical injuries, elicited outrage over their idleness. But how could vagabonds, who on average migrated some 20 to 80 miles a month, be called idle? William Harrison, in his popular Description of England, 1577, offered an explanation. Idleness was wasted energy. The vagabonds' constant movement led nowhere. In moving around, they failed, like the Indians, to put down healthy roots and join the settled labor force of servants, tenants, and artisans. Harrison thought of idleness in the same way we might today refer to the idling motor of a car. The motor runs in place, the idle poor were trapped in economic stasis. Waste people, like wastelands, were stagnant. Their energy produced nothing of value. They were like festering weeds, ruining an idle garden.